Well, thank you all so much for being here. This is MassHire Metro North's healthcare panel for the young people of Somerville, but this will eventually become a living document that we can share with youth worldwide, everywhere. So I'm really excited to do this. I'm really excited to have such amazing professionals. So let's just start off with a little brief introduction from everyone. So let's start with Lisa, and then you can pick someone to follow and just kind of briefly talk about who you are.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa. I am a physical therapist for a living. So I have my doctorate in physical therapist from Northeastern, and I love my job, love what I do, and I get to help people every day, get to help people get out of pain. And I work in Medfield, but I also do an outpatient setting, but I also work in home care as well. I have some clients who I just go into their homes and basically help them out based on their individual needs. And yeah, that's kind of my story.
Hello, everyone. My name's Dan, excuse me, my name's Dan Maloney. I am the manager of service programs at Boston Healthcare for the Homeless. I oversee all of our volunteer programs, our undergraduate internship programs, and our AmeriCorps programs. So that's why every time I shut off my video, you get the AmeriCorps symbol. I am not clinical. I am not a nurse or a doctor or a physical therapist or anything like that. But one of the good things about my job is I get to rub elbows with all of them every single day. And I will also say, just to back up what Abby said, I may end up talking about this on the panel, but my first job was working in a hospital. I was 15 years old, and the nurses on the floor that I worked in were invariably very, very kind to me and helped out a kid who basically I had no idea what he was doing. So to pay it forward, every time I organize an event and we have extra food, I always leave it at the nurses' station for them, because the nurses at Braintree Hospital were always so nice to me. So that's my story.
So yeah, hi, my name is Abigail. I'm a registered nurse. I also am in school for my NP as well. Nursing is definitely very difficult career right now, definitely emotionally, physically demanding, but it's definitely very rewarding. And I think regardless of kind of the way the state of the world is right now, there's so much growth and different, like there's always, you can make a change and work in so many different fields in nursing. So there's definitely a lot to choose from, and I love it, obviously. That's kind of my story.
Hi everyone. My name is Ella, and I am currently a second year occupational therapy student at Mass General Institute of Health Professions. So I'm not actually in the professional field yet, but I'm making my way towards that. I'm actually an alum of Somerville High. I graduated in 2014. So I really wanted to get on this panel because I love Somerville High and I want everyone to know about the profession of occupational therapy, because a lot of people don't know what it's about. So yeah, I'm in a doctorate program right now. It's 3 years and I'm in my second year, so I have one more year to go. And yeah, I don't really know what I'm going to do yet, but there's so many options for occupational therapy. It could be outpatient, inpatient, just like physical therapy. There's like so many different settings you can do. So
I want to thank each of you for coming to this virtual panel. This is going to be a really valuable resource for our students. And we're just really appreciative that you're taking the time out of what is an extremely busy and demanding field. I know that you all have very full lives and schedules, and I just really want to thank you for taking the time to be here today. So we can move on to some of the initial questions. Some of you alluded to this in your introductions, but I'd love to hear just a little bit more about what sorts of training or schooling or certifications did you have to get to do what you do? How long did it take? And if you've already talked about that a bit, If you could just offer a little bit more insight into what it is that you do for students who might not, for example, have heard of occupational therapy, who might wonder, what does healthcare for the homeless look like? So if you could just expand a little bit and talk about your training, that would be awesome.
Sure. So I went to undergraduate school at Union College in upstate New York after I went to Somerville High. And I didn't really know. I started off as pre-med because I wanted to do something in the healthcare profession. But I took one bio class, actually 2 bio classes, and I decided that wasn't for me. It was a little too hard, very science, really science focused. And I was like, I wanted something more social sciencey, definitely something therapeutic. So I was a psych major. I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in psychology. And it only till like senior year, I kind of decided I wanted to do either speech therapy or occupational therapy. Was I was posse. I wasn't, but I had really good, like my best friends were in the posse program and I love posse. So yeah, great program. And Somerville High does it. I think they still do it with Union. Yeah, so that's great. And so I was thinking about speech therapy. I was thinking about occupational therapy. And I eventually chose occupational therapy because it didn't require a chemistry prerequisite. And knowing me, I am not good at chemistry. I wasn't good at Somerville High. I didn't take it in college. So I didn't want to do that. And, so I tried to, do what prerequisites that I think I could do. And occupational therapy had prerequisites that I felt comfortable in, including like human anatomy and physiology, which I also took at Somerville High, which is great, but like more advanced. So I feel like I've taken human anatomy like multiple times now, but I'm pretty like good at it. What else did I have to take? There are some that I already took in undergrad, like statistics, developmental psychology, those kind of things. So the only other class I really had to take outside of undergrad was human anatomy and physiology, which I took through Mass General online. So it was kind of easy to do that. And it also helped me. I feel like it helped me with the application process to Mass General. I feel like they saw that I took a class through Mass General and did well, and they liked that. So, but I actually took 2 years off after undergrad to work for 2 years. And I worked at the Heard Ripley School in Melrose. And it's a school for kids who have learning disabilities, autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, stuff like that. And I was an assistant teacher. So I kind of got to, not only did it help the main teacher, I could observe our occupational therapist at the school, which was really helpful. And it made me want to do OT more. So I did that for 2 years and it was a great experience. And it was really helpful, especially for applying to OT school, talking about my experience working with kids and working with an OT and stuff like that. So we also had to do for grad school some observation hours. I think it's like around, you have to have like 40 observation hours, which isn't that much. I was able to do it again through where I worked, that counted as observation hours. And I was able to observe a family friend who's a hand therapist, an outpatient in Somerville, actually, and her kids went to Somerville High, actually. So some connections there to find observation hours is very helpful. But that's about it in terms of like certifications. And obviously I'm not a professional yet, but that's how I kind of got into the grad school program. So yeah.
I have as far as certifications go, I have a CVA, which is Certified Volunteer Administrator. I'm putting the link to their webpage in the chat. That honestly, that didn't take all that long to get, but by the time I went for it, I'd been doing volunteer administration for at least 5 years. So a lot of it was sort of stuff that I picked up in the real world. But if I'm being totally honest, I would not say that this is a terribly demanding certification. Before that, I had a 4-year degree in, I was a political science major. I am a big proponent of a liberal arts education. Maybe it's not for everybody, but not everybody knows exactly what they want to do. And if you don't know if you're 18 years old and you don't know what you want to do with your life, and you can afford the student loans, then a liberal arts education, I'll put my 2 cents in for. Beyond that, one thing I am going to probably pitch today for people is the AmeriCorps program. I do manage that here, and for people that aren't familiar with it, the simplest way to explain it is that AmeriCorps is like the Peace Corps, but you don't go overseas. You end up serving at a place like Boston Healthcare for the Homeless, for example, for 10 months. I was in AmeriCorps way back in the day at Project for Pride in Living in South Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's a great program. I love the program. I loved my 13 months at Project for Pride. Every time I go to Minneapolis, I spend half a day back at PPL doing a little volunteer work for them. Nobody knows who I am anymore. They're like, who's this guy with the Boston accent? But yeah.
As I was saying before, I'm a physical therapist, so I get to help people, in pain, people after surgeries, kind of recover. And, they're kind of like with occupational therapy, there's lots of different options to, and this field is very variable. You can be an inpatient, an outpatient, you can be in the army, you can be really kind of in home care. So it's definitely a great career if you want lots of options. But in terms of education, lots of education for physical therapy. So I have my undergraduate degree from UMass Amherst. And I actually I was double majored in kinesiology, which is the study of movement, if someone doesn't know. And also I was a dance major. So I actually had my dancing career right before that. And I went to Boston Arts Academy for high school. And I was a dancer there. And then, it just seemed like a great career for me to go into physical therapy because I wanted to go into some sort of science, but also I wanted to make sure the movement is still part of my life. And I think PT was definitely kind of on my radar for that. So then, as part of undergrad, probably around sophomore year, I realized I wanted to do that. So I looked into what's required to become a physical therapist. And it's actually a doctorate degree now. So it's a clinical doctorate, so it's a DPT, so it's not a PhD. Some people confuse it with that. So I ended up applying to some schools and chose to go to Northeastern University for my doctorate in PT. And that actually took 3.5 years after undergraduate. So it was 4 years plus 3.5. And the reason for that is because there was a co-op. So I actually had 6 months of work experience, which was really nice as well. And now it's my 3rd year kind of practicing in the field. So that's a lot of school, but it's a great career.
I kind of had an interesting story, I guess. Since I was a kid, I knew I wanted to be in medicine. But actually, it's funny because I wish that this type of meeting existed back then, because my whole family came from Ukraine, so there was no one to help actually with. I was the first one to go to college here in the United States. There was no one to really help me understand costs and programs and all of that stuff. So I personally feel like there was a lot of mistakes I made in terms of so an RN is an associate's degree, because there's also LPN, which is you don't have, it's basically, you can work as a nurse, but there's a lot of things you can't do, such as admissions and things like that. So they call it an underpaid nurse, I guess, but they take similar boards and such. And so so an RN is an associate's degree, and I ended up going to a private nursing program that was crazy, crazy expensive. Thinking that I got into nursing school when like I didn't know like that there was community or you could do prereqs and things like that. So I think that that's like a big thing when thinking to go into a program, because nursing program is really expensive and a lot of people differ from that. Or I know like because I teach clinicals as well as a third job. I teach nursing students. So speaking with them and learning their story, that was one of their biggest struggles, was they couldn't afford to go to school or they had to do part-time programs. And so there's a lot of different like routes that people don't know. They can do some prereqs and transfer it in so that way they can save there. So I went to Laboratoire for my associate's degree. And one of the beauties, I guess, with nursing is that you're able to work while being in the program, because I know a lot of programs you can't, you're not allowed to work. And that's kind of why it took longer, but it's one of the beauties because I was able to work full time and go to school. For my bachelor's, I did a 100% online program at Southern New Hampshire University. And then now for my master's, I'm at Regis College. In terms of, usually the hardest is getting to your RN, like an associate's degree, because bachelor's is mostly online and kind of like paperwork. And then master's is obviously totally different. NP is just a different route because you're a clinician. So I can't fully talk about that because I'm not there yet. I still have another like year and a half left in the program, or a year left. But I will say that, like I was talking about earlier, there's a lot of different routes in nursing. So I started off in a nursing home, like since I'm primarily Russian speaking, I started off in a nursing home. I did adult daycare center. I did home care, all with Russian speaking. I then moved, after all that experience, I moved on to the hospital setting. So I worked in medical surgical unit, worked my way up to the ICU, and now I'm actually at Mass General. I heard a lot of Mass Generals and there's conversations on, I started as of like about a month and a half ago in the ER at Mass General. So that's one thing I always say, like, I feel like sometimes in certain careers, there's no growth or there's no movement or people feel stuck. So that's one thing that I am really thankful is I'll, I guess, never be out of a job, thankfully, especially with the way the state of the world is now. But also if you're not happy with something, there's always movement, there's always growth, and there's kind of like every healthcare professional, there's always an importance and everyone has a role. I know sometimes like a lot of doctors or nurses are, they're viewed very highly, but we rely a lot of an occupational on dietary, on physical therapy. We rely heavily on them because they help our lives, and like we are supposed to know a little bit about everything, but they're really the specialists and help make our job easier and help the patient. So I guess it really depends on what you like in healthcare, what aspect you like, can kind of differ where you want to go. And like I said, with nursing, for me personally, it definitely is very stressful. There's a lot of education. Usually an associate's degree full-time is like 2 years. My bachelor's I took longer, but you can get it done in 18 months. And then master's is usually like full-time, another 2 years. If you do it part-time, 3 years. So there's a lot of flexibility, there's a lot of growth. And like I said, I have a huge passion for nursing. That's kind of why I like why I'm an educator as well.
It was really awesome to hear from all of you. I really appreciated hearing the different perspectives about the ways in which you've been able to find flexibility or passion in what you do, whether that's bringing dance and movement into your profession, or whether that's incorporating other experiences like teaching and education. So that's really, really cool. Next, I'd love to hear from each of you about what a day in the life is like, just to kind of give our students an idea of what it would actually look like to be in your profession.
Well, especially these days in the pandemic, change is really the only constant. it's been a wild 2 years. It's where do I even begin? To the extent that I have a typical day, a lot of it is coming in, getting through my emails. Healthcare for the Homeless is an email-driven organization, so you got to get through your emails. You got to get through your inbox. Anything that gets done either in person or over email. One of the really great things about my job, though, is that because there's so much going on and because there's such an emphasis at Healthcare for the Homeless on interdisciplinary approaches to problem solving, I get to work with a lot of different people who have a lot of different roles. So maybe I'm setting up a training for the new AmeriCorps class that is coming in. I may go to the doctor that runs our office-based addiction treatment program to make sure that he can do 2.5 hours with our people on the nature of addiction and what is driving fatalities in the Boston area and all of that. Then in the very next breath, I may go to one of our nurse practitioners who runs a clinic for immigrant populations and provides services to these patients in their native language. And so we might have like a 35-minute conversation on, we need a Vietnamese speaker, we need a Portuguese speaker. It's just basically that for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Lots of problem solving, lots of making it up as you go along, a lot of making plans and then realizing your plans aren't going to work anymore, so you improvise. Everybody over here runs around like their hair's on fire, but we get it done. I think that's one thing we take a lot of pride in here is everybody's busy. And there's a lot on the line, but we get it done.
So with nursing, depending on kind of which department you're in, similar to what Dan said, it's like you hit the ground running. It's nuts all the time. Being in like the ER right now, there's really no rhyme or rhythm that I've learned. You just, it's constant chaos. It's constant triaging and getting people to where they need to go. When you work mostly in med surg, or if you worked in critical care, or if you'd like to work in critical care, it's a little bit more organized. You kind of come in, get a report on your patient, look them up, go in, see your patient, do an assessment, and then usually start with your med pass. Once you finish med pass, you usually have to like either do documenting or provide patient care. So every day is very different. Again, depending on where you work, there's a lot of like rounding. So like in the critical care unit before, we would sit down for like an hour and round on the patient with dietary, occupational, physical therapy. Everybody would be there, all the members of the interdisciplinary team, and we kind of talk about the patient as a whole. What is their plan of care, not just for today, but like what's their goals of getting them out of the ICU or getting them to the floor or rehab and such like that. So it really depends on which department you work, because you're going to see how your day is, but most of the time it's getting report, looking your patient up, doing your patient care, and then having time in the middle of everybody coming at you to do documentation and kind of, it's not the other part with nursing is really dealing with families, because sometimes families are even more challenging than the patients themselves, because they're going through a really difficult time, and some people have really bad coping skills. So most of the time, the patient's actually the best one. The family's the one that's the most difficult to deal with because they don't know what's going on. They don't have medical background. They're not there. And especially now with COVID, with the visiting policies, you're sitting a lot of the time on the phone, like while documenting. We're in between, talking to physical therapy and like organizing the patient's kind of day in care and everything with testing. So that's a big part of nursing now.
My day-to-day schedule is a little bit crazy, but that's just because I picked that schedule myself. So I work a outpatient physical therapy job where I'm in a clinic. So I go into the clinic 5 days a week, and then I'm there until 8 p.m. every day except for Fridays. But obviously I start a little bit later, like 11 or 1. So I'm, in outpatient physical therapy, it's usually the one downside is that you do have to work early mornings and late nights just because people need after school times, after work, or before work times. So you have to be kind of flexible with that. But I'm kind of used to the schedule at this point. And, um, on top of that, I also, like I was saying before, I do some home care physical therapy. So I usually in the mornings, I'll see a client or two at 9 or 10 o'clock. And then I try to schedule that based on the location and, to make sure my drive is a little bit better. But kind of like in nursing field, same thing with physical therapy. It's very flexible. If you're working in a hospital setting, usually physical therapy sees patients between 9 and 5. But there's no such thing as late nights usually in PT, but except for outpatient. So the latest I work is usually 8. But you do get used to the busy schedule and, lots of documentation as always. That's probably one of my least favorite parts of the job, but that's just kind of how this profession works, and most healthcare professions really.
I just want to clarify what occupational therapy is because a lot of people don't know what that is. I didn't know what it was in high school, so it's very similar to physical therapy, but we kind of work with people who have more long-term disability. Kind of like if we were to work with someone who has Parkinson's, we help them do their everyday activities that are meaningful to them. So that could include getting up and putting on clothes in the morning, making a meal, walking, just going for a walk, having leisure time, anything like that. And there's so many settings that we could work in. That includes working with kids who have autism spectrum disorder, work on just using scissors to cut paper, working with clients who had a traumatic brain injury, who had stroke, just get back to doing their activities of daily living is what we call them. So that's kind of why it's a very therapeutic profession, and it is very similar to physical therapy in that way. So for a day-to-day in my grad school life, I guess I started grad school when the pandemic happened. So that was unfortunate, but we had to be all virtual on Zoom every day. So I mean, we made it work. Mass General is really great about making things interactive as possible. And we made sure we had breakout rooms, work with our teams, that we get lots of teamwork in graduate school for occupational therapy. And it was just a great experience overall. My first year. Right now, we're back in person, thankfully. We do have to wear masks every day, but it's great to be back in person, to actually see everyone and be with our teams and stuff like that and see our professors. So I would say right now I'm going to school on Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays mainly. So you kind of have, the good thing about this program is you usually have like a couple days that are mostly free, especially Fridays, which is great because who doesn't want to have a free Friday? But sometimes these Tuesdays and Fridays could have field work that we have to do, which includes going to observe a clinical setting. This semester we are observing a school setting, seeing pediatrics. So it depends on the schedule, what placements you get in that sense. So that's what's happening right now. I know next year for my third year, we will be doing our fieldwork 2 placements, which are full-time, not classes, just being in like the clinical setting. So I already know one of my placements will be in Washington, D.C. at this place called the Lab School, which is working with kids who have behavioral issues and learning disabilities, stuff like that. Kind of similar experience that I had in my job before grad school. So it's kind of helpful to have that experience. And then I know for the summer next year, it will be something in the Boston area, whether that be working at Spalding Rehabilitation Center, which is part of Mass General, which is part of the reason why I decided to go here, because they have so many connections with Mass General. Whether it be just like all the partner healthcare locations, Spalding Rehabilitation Center. It's just such a big thing in Massachusetts. So you could have so many connections to different jobs and clinical placements and field work. So, but that's kind of what my routine is like right now. I know it's a full-time job, pretty much occupational therapy school. However, there is time to have like a little part-time job. A lot of my classmates babysit, and I just started a babysitting job in the area in Belmont. So it was very helpful because you don't make any income when you're a full-time student. So you need something. There's also lots of jobs on campus that you can do. You could be teacher assistant, grad assistants, work at admin roles. So there are a lot of different options in order to like get some sort of money during your time as a full-time student. And I would definitely, explore that, especially babysitting is very good because it works with, it's flexible hours. It works with your schedule. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your day today. It sounds like a lot is going on, but you're really organizing yourselves well. And I appreciate everything that you shared with us so that the youth really know what's happening day to day in these positions. So our next questions, I'm going to ask two different questions in one shot here. And I'm also putting it in the chat, so you can take a look at the chat to follow along as well. So first question, how has your job changed over the course of the pandemic? And what do you think the new normal will be like for your profession? Also, who is one of your role models or someone that inspires you?
Yeah, that's a great question about the pandemic. My job, I originally started pre-pandemic, working in the outpatient clinic setting. And then of course, March 2020 comes around and here we go, I don't have a job. So I was actually on furlough for my position in outpatient because patients weren't coming in, there were no surgeries. It was just something that never happens. So I actually had a little bit of time where I was on furlough, but I decided to actually take a job at a nursing home, which was very difficult. Lots of PPE, personal protective equipment, masks, gowns, wasn't very well managed, unfortunately. I think I learned a lot about it at the end, but it was just a temporary kind of solution for me to still have a job and to help people. And then just kind of circling back to, I was able to get my job back. But I guess the biggest change is probably the masking. I do have a mask on every single day between 9 and 12 hours a day. So kind of used to it at this point. But another thing that did change, I would say, is virtual visits. So I personally don't do a lot of virtual physical therapy, but I do have some clients that do prefer to be on Zoom if they're traveling or, they're kind of prefer not to come into the clinic. It's definitely not the same because physical therapy is so hands-on. We do a lot of therapeutic manual therapy, massage. So if you don't have that on screen, obviously on screen you don't. So, but it is very helpful in some ways where you can check in with, I have a patient right now who's a college student who had a hip surgery and she's away. So she's still able to check in with me every 2 weeks and make sure that she's progressing well and she's doing what she needs to be doing to continue her rehab. So there are some positives that actually came out of this. So I would say that's the biggest change. In terms of inpatient, I'm sure it's a little bit different because in the hospital setting, you still have to wear the PPE, the masking. much more difficult for patients, and obviously lots of lives have been lost with COVID. So I know that the post-COVID syndrome is one of the really interesting phenomenons that's going on, and there's lots of research going on right now in physical therapy in particular, that movement and rehab and exercise is really, really helpful for getting from recovering from COVID. So that's another interesting fact. And one of my role models, wow, I would say at the moment, I would say my clinic manager at my clinic is one of my biggest role models. She's wonderful. She's got 2 kids, and she's able to maintain a full-time job and run a clinic, and also take courses, continuing education. So I kind of look up to her for how she handles different situations, and I always go for her for advice. And I would say one of the biggest things that's important as a young clinician or a young healthcare professional when you first graduate is really making sure you find a job where you have that support, because it's really key. If you're in a setting where you're just expected to do the job, and that's just kind of not possible when you first graduate. So that's one of the advice I would definitely recommend to people that are coming out of school soon. So.
It was actually funny because when the pandemic started, I just came to the ICU. I was like sort of kind of coming off orientation, and it was like, when people say PTSD is not even like the word, how depressing it was. A lot of it was more not only just physically demanding, like putting on the PPEs and no one knows what's going on, but there was a huge, for nurses, it was a huge mental struggle. Having families say goodbye over FaceTime, pulling people off ventilators and putting them on morphine drips and basically carrying out, like, it sounds really depressing, but I like to tell the truth, because had I known what I knew, things might have changed. But just obviously more of like the depressing aspect of it was really tough, besides obviously PPEs. I think now we're definitely in a better place. Obviously, way better than when it first started. But I think that the new normal is, unfortunately, I'm still praying that things will like give it a few more rounds, and that this will kind of more normalize, or be like a kind of a flu type situation, instead of what we're seeing now, where people are afraid to come into contact with one another. And I think that like what I'm seeing now in the ER, or even when I was in the ICU prior, a lot of people neglected their health because of the pandemic. So everybody was so worried about COVID that they were not, there were people having heart attacks, and people not taking their medications because they didn't want to go to the pharmacy, or they didn't have, that support because family lived far away and they were worried to see each other, and there was no one to like educate patients on proper medication management. So we're seeing a lot of the repercussions now. And it's like, I know, for example, right now in Mass General, we're in code disaster all the time. Like, it's just so chaotic. There's so many people all the time. And a lot of kind of what Dan was saying earlier, there's a lot of, we're seeing a lot of drug overdoses, ton of new addicts. That's like probably, I would say like 60% of the population we're seeing. Despite like physical health, there's a lot of mental health going on right now. There's a lot of people are resorting to drugs because they don't have proper coping mechanisms. And like, even with therapy, for example, everyone's doing things over Zoom because obviously we're trying to social distance, but some people need that physical interaction and need to be in a space with somebody, and that's not physically possible. And there's only so many hours in a day. So I think just the whole chaos of healthcare in general has caused, a lot of trouble, and I'm sure everybody can relate to that in some way or another. But I do think that we're going in the right direction. I think that things are starting to get better. I think people are starting to realize that, obviously we have to be safe, but that like life moves on and stuff. So the biggest struggle, like I said, that we're seeing right now from the COVID aspect is more of the mental health and like those type of struggles that people are going through. and they're not opening up about it and bottling it up, and we're seeing a lot of suicide, things like that, like really obviously upsetting things. In terms of role models, I would definitely say our head of the ICU. So I still work there per diem. He's definitely my role model. He's like a dad to me. Constantly checks in. Was really upset when I left, but he knew kind of that I needed to grow for my NP to gain more experience in pediatrics and psych, things that we didn't have. He was a small community hospital, but he's definitely my role model. He's helped me like progress even as a provider. He's allowed me to do so many things and always educating me and basically trained me like one of his residents. So most of the time, like I would be like doing like MD work. So he's definitely changed my life, and one of the reasons what pushed me to go to NP.
So how has the job changed over the course of the pandemic? Well, when the pandemic started here, let me back up and step in. This will make a little more sense. The population that we work with are people that are living in shelter for the most part, or are living on the street. So one of the great things about the people that I work with, especially the doctors and the nurses, is when COVID first became a thing, long before we got into lockdown, they were making plans. They realized what the threat was to our particular population, and they were making plans before everybody went into lockdown, so that we would be ready when the virus hit. So when lockdown started happening, we immediately had to start putting in screening procedures from day one, checking symptoms for everybody that came into the building. For the patients that we have on site here, they're all locked down to their care floors. They can't move anymore from floor to floor to make sure that people aren't spreading the virus to people, in other rooms or on other floors. The entirety of our third floor was turned into a COVID ward. You couldn't even go onto the third floor for months at a time. It became all about sort of controlling who comes into the building, who's leaving the building, and what they're doing inside of the building, their movements inside of the building. So when you talk about what the new normal is going to look like in healthcare, I think there's going to be a lot of what people are doing here, sort of separating out what needs to be done, what we absolutely need versus what would be nice to have, and then figuring out how to do what absolutely needs to be done with the minimum number of people, so that any sort of exposure to the virus is as contained as possible. Just to back up what Abigail was saying, mental health issues, substance use issues, substance problems are definitely a thing. So I think another thing in healthcare, at least, and some places are better at it than others. So in many ways, if somebody's going to go into healthcare, you need to do this for yourself. You need to be an advocate for your mental wellness, and you need to be an advocate for the mental well-being of your colleagues. The only really sort of advice on, if we're talking about rationing, what do I need to do versus what would be nice to have, along those same lines, I would say to people, be really, really clear on the things that you can do, the things that are your responsibility, and be comfortable letting go of the things that you can't control. Because sweating the things that you can't control at a time like this is, that's the road to madness. That's the road to to burning yourself out. Never be afraid, especially these days. Always be professional, always do your job, but don't be afraid to be an advocate for yourself and for your needs. Someone who is a role model, somebody who inspires me. I keep talking about AmeriCorps, so this may sound like a cop-out. I'm really sorry, but I'm really inspired by our AmeriCorps. For the most part, these are people, brand new college graduates in their early 20s who are being thrown into the teeth of the pandemic. Age-wise, they're much closer to the students that are going to be watching this video than certainly they are to me. These are the people that are our AmeriCorps are much closer to being your peers than mine. We have them embedded across our entire organization. We cannot do what we do without our AmeriCorps. And to a person, every single one of them rises to the challenge. It's astonishing. I'm going to put another thing into the chat here, which is an article that was written at the beginning of the pandemic from WBUR. I don't know how many of you know that or remember, but the convention center in South Boston was turned into a 1,000 bed field hospital for people with COVID. 500 of the beds were run by Mass General Hospital. There's MGH again. And then the other 500 beds were run by us for homeless people. And so the article describes one of the nurses who was sort of running the field hospital, and she's terrific. She inspires me because she literally, for 3 months, didn't get a chance to see her kids because she didn't want to bring the virus home, and she was taking care of people who had it. And one of the doctors that ran the place. But what I want to bring to anybody that reads this article, what I want to bring to their attention is the part in there about the entertainment that was there for the patients, how we set up an internet cafe inside of quarantine and a rock garden, and there was arts and crafts, and there was movies, and there was cornhole, and there was yoga, to keep people entertained and, you know, sane inside of quarantine. And that was all done by two of our AmeriCorps. They did all of that. 22 years old, 23 years old, going in there with the full PPE for 12 hours at a time, and making that all possible. So it's people like that, like our AmeriCorps, who inspire me. And you know, again, if you when you graduate from college, whoever's watching this, if you don't know what else to do in your life, there's always AmeriCorps.
So in terms of my grad school and for the course of the pandemic, as I said before, I started right when the pandemic hit, so we had to be all virtual for classes. And then when we were able to go in, we had to wear full PPE masks, face shield or goggles. So, and that was for labs. That was a bit challenging because we have to do a lot of hands-on stuff, and it's really hard to hear each other when you're wearing a face shield. So that was hard, and also fogs up, and like that was terrible. I did not like face shields. And then in terms of, and then now what's good about Mass General is that we were able to, even the students were able to get access to the vaccine like very, very early, because Mass General just had a ton of them. So I was vaccinated in like January, just waiting on that booster, you know, like waiting for Mass General to tell us when we can do it. So that's good, just like the access to that. And Mass General is so focused on safety in general, that we were just really cautious and which could be like frustrating at times because we wanted, when there was a time where we wanted to like be able to go into school and we couldn't, we were still virtual. But now, as I said before, we're in person with masks. We do have to like sign like a COVID pass every day saying that we don't have symptoms, which is good. And then we have to change our mask every time we go into a facility and come out. So, I mean, all the measures that they're taking are great and I like support them. And in terms of like occupational therapy as a profession, I know that the pandemic has made telehealth a huge thing. And I think that it's going to continue on for a while because it has been helpful for people, especially for clients that can't, travel, have transportation issues. The virtual setting may be better for them. So I know that doing research and talking with our professors and stuff like that, we have seen that telehealth is beneficial. We even have done our own telehealth with some people for our field work, stuff like that. We did a group mental health therapy session with some clients who had traumatic brain injury through telehealth, and that went really well. So far, I think telehealth is gonna keep going for a while. And I do think that we're going to have like COVID long haulers, which are people who have had COVID and still are suffering with dealing with some symptoms that they previously had with COVID. And like, that's why they're called long haulers. Like whether it be like cognitive problems, fatigue, memory issues. I think occupational therapists are going to work a lot with those people and helping them return to their prior level of functioning by assisting them in performing their activities of daily living. And because occupational therapy can help with cognitive stuff, with executive functioning skills, stuff like that. So I definitely think we're going to see a lot of people that have had COVID. They're actually COVID long haul clinics, which have occupational therapists, speech therapists, physical therapists, I think neuropsychologists, that they're having right now around the country because people still have symptoms after having COVID. So I think that's going to go on for a while. I think the market of OT and PT are going to be like really big on people who have had COVID. So I think that is what's really changed over the course of the pandemic. And that's like telehealth is definitely going to be the new normal. Wearing masks everywhere is going to be the new normal in hospital settings, in school settings. So yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of getting to that new normal right now. And I mean, it's working. The grad school is working really well. I know the OT profession is doing pretty well, even with the pandemic. And then in terms of a role model, I think, or someone that inspires me, I guess it'd be like my faculty mentor that I have right now, who's Diane Smith, who is one of my professors also, but she is a mentor too. We have to do these doctoral projects where we do a research project, and then we actually go out and do the research and field work and stuff like that. She's great. She's helped me so much come up with a research question, and she's always there. She's funny, like relatable. She's a great faculty mentor, and I'm really happy that she's actually the person that interviewed me when I was applying to grad school. So Mass General has so many good faculty members, and I'm really happy that she is one of them. And she works with a lot of like social justice issues with OT, which, people don't know that OT can do kind of like advocacy. We really focus on that. My doctoral project right now is actually focused on women in the Boston area who were previously incarcerated. They're called returning citizens, and how reentry programs that include occupational therapy services, helping to get back to like housing, employment, stuff like that can be really beneficial for a returning citizen. So that's kind of my project right now. And my mentor has been really great, and she's really helpful for me. So yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I loved how all of you just bounced off of each other's ideas, called each other out. I mean, that's really what it's about. You know, you're all in the same kind of boat here when it comes to healthcare and kind of facing the similar challenges. So it's really great to kind of see that collaborative element that you all have been showing. So I kind of want to just introduce Jordy, who has just joined in, and Lisa had to step out. So it kind of worked out timing wise. She really appreciated hearing everyone. So, and apologizes for leaving early. You know, it's just how the nature of the healthcare field works. So again, thank you all so much for all of your time, putting in your effort to be here. It's really going to be important for the youth. And for Jordy, we're going to start you off with this next question. But before you answer the question, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, what drew you to your field in whatever healthcare you've done. And then I will post these two questions in the chat. So just kind of relate your job in terms of youth. Just say what kind of things or internships or opportunities could be helpful for youth to get to where you are right now. And do you have any advice for young people looking into things similar to what you do and can be very vague about it? So just feel free to share what you want to. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. So I guess a little bit about myself. I joined the industry about 9 or 10 years ago. I went to UConn for biomedical engineering. So, you know, to kind of step back a little bit, the reason I joined UConn for biomedical engineering is, you know, my father was in the biology field, and I was like, well, I'm good at math. So what happens when you combine those two things? So started looking into engineering programs that were kind of like that. So I naturally then stepped into academic research at first after school. So that was at the Weiss Institute, which is a really interesting area to be in between them and the Broad Institute. They do a lot of different things for medical devices. But from there, I then moved into more field service-based types of roles. So I first worked for a small startup called T2 Biosystems. There, I had about 5 different roles throughout my time there, between manufacturing, reliability engineering, and then eventually leading their service team internationally. And then eventually I moved on to a larger company called Instrumentation Laboratory. There I spent some time being their worldwide service operations manager. And then I recently just joined a new small startup company called MeMed, where I'm their associate director of service for the US. So it's kind of a quick background on my, at least where I currently am. So yeah, anything else you want me to cover on that side, Sal? Cool. So then what I'm going to do is I'll start to go through your questions there. So are there high school jobs or internships to help prepare someone for this profession? What kind of experiences would you? Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's a great question. High school wise, I think, you know, the biggest thing for healthcare especially is to just focus on, you know, what you want to really do in the healthcare industry. There's so many different things that you can do, which I see a lot of people here have a broad range of experience and different types of roles, right? So I think that's a good one to start to kind of just think about, what would you want to do? Do you want to work in a hospital? Do you want to work in the industry and try to develop products, etc.? So kind of, you know, think about that a little bit through the high school upbringing, just to then think about where would you want to study and what for. That's to me always a very hard choice. It's very early on to have to figure out what you want to do. So, you know, I think just trying to learn as much as you can about the industry, what intrigues you, what do you find interesting, because then when you start to go to college for whether it's biology, whether it's an engineering type of trade that can bring you into the healthcare field, whether it's specifically pre-med, something like that, right? So there's a lot of different things you can do in school, but then internship wise, I think that was an interesting one that you brought up. Definitely, I would always suggest to do as many internships as you can and find as many as you can throughout each summertime, or even a short stint in the winter. Those are a little more difficult to find, especially these days, as I know I heard at the tail end of talking about COVID a little bit. Internships were a little bit difficult this year and last year because of, you know, naturally not being in the office. So I know at IL, we tried to still introduce some internship programs to get people involved as much as we could. But it was definitely difficult to kind of really map out what that would look like. But I would suggest for sure, as you know, summer times, due to the 2.5 to 3 month internships, do them in a few different fields so that you can start to really map out as well what you like and don't like. Because that's for me, I did an internship in Cubis Pharmaceuticals, and that is also how I learned that I didn't want to work in pharmaceuticals. So, it's you're not always going to go join an internship and then eventually move into working for that company, but sometimes you're going to love it, and a lot of companies will hire you after internships as long as it goes well on both sides. So I think that's definitely a big one for sure. And then I guess anyone for young people interested in doing what I do. So especially in the medical diagnostic field. So for me, I've always worked for medical device types of companies that you're kind of bringing in an assay, which is pretty much a step-by-step process to detect something in the bloodstream, for example. Taking a manual assay that is developed on a bench in a lab, bringing that in combination with electromechanical systems, so fully automated systems, and then coming out with a result that now all of a sudden, instead of having to do that process manually in a lab, which is going to take a lot of manual effort, transferring that over to a designed analyzer that can do that quicker, more efficiently, more accurately. That all takes a lot of different background and knowledge to be able to bring that together as a whole team. So I think that's something that's, the biggest thing of advice that I would say is on-the-job learning for those types of jobs is huge. So the sooner you can get internships, the sooner that you can start just kind of working in the ground up with a smaller company, especially, you're going to get a broad range of experience where they're going to ask you to sometimes run things in the lab. Sometimes it'll be, getting involved on the analyzer side of things with that electromechanical system. I think in general, on-the-job learning is the biggest thing for what I do, at least. Biomedical engineering at UConn was a good program, but does it prepare you for how electromechanical systems work and how to apply assays to that? No. It's a good test to show that you can learn those things. But on-the-job learning is huge for especially the diagnostic field.
Okay, so any high school jobs or internships that would help you prepare for OT. So I don't think in high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do really. So, and that's totally okay. Even in college, I didn't really know what to do, which is also really okay. So in high school, I would focus on just doing well in your classes and doing a lot of extracurriculars that will make your resume look good for getting into undergrad. And if you're really interested, if you're interested in a healthcare career, I would really encourage you to take the more sciencey classes like human anatomy. Maybe try the AP classes like AP Bio. I did AP Bio. It was a great class, even though college bio was really hard. But it helps prepare you for that. Other stuff like that, those kind of sciencey classes, and even talk to your teachers about that and get their perspectives, because I know there's great faculty there, and talk to your guidance counselors, chat about what you might want to do. But again, you don't have to decide exactly what you want to do, but it's definitely good to explore what you could be interested in, whether it be in classes or talking to your guidance counselor or, talking to alumni like me. Doing extracurriculars would really help build your resume. I did 3 sports at Somerville. I was in National Honor Society, and, just doing as best as you possibly can to look, that will help you for undergrad. And then, it's more of, in undergrad, I would start to focus more on internships. I did an internship because I knew I wanted to work with children, regardless of what my profession might be. In a therapeutic setting, I did an internship for a Judge Baker Children's Center I believe it's in Mission Hill in Boston, my junior year of college. And I got that through the Union College Career Center. So that's also really good. I mean, I'm not gonna like promote Union College, but if you want to go there, I mean, but I'm sure a lot of colleges have great career centers and they help you get internships like that. So anything, and that was with kids who have like a summer internship with kids who have ADHD, and that was a great experience. And that also like helped me think more about like occupational therapy, and it made me more excited for that kind of field, like a therapeutic field and stuff like that. So definitely trying to do internships because it will help you realize what you want to do more and get you great experience. So that's more for like, like in college, but again, I would say high school, just focus on doing well, making connections with teachers, talking to your guidance counselor. Any advice for young people that may be interested in what I do? I would just definitely say, don't like be afraid if you don't know what to do. Like even in college, I changed my major in college twice, I think. So I was gonna be pre-med, and as I said earlier, I did it. It was too hard for me. Um, Lots of respect to pre-med though. It's great, but it just wasn't for me. I wanted to I focused more on, and then I switched to an English major actually. I thought I wanted to be an English major, and then I thought, I still want to do something kind of more healthcare involved. So I feel like maybe psychology would help with that. And so I ended up being a psychology major. But again, like I didn't know what I wanted to do career-wise my whole undergraduate career. Even in high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I would just say, try out different things, take different classes, just try a bunch of things, because it really, you don't have to be so set in stone on what you do. So I just like really wouldn't worry about that. You can switch your majors a bunch of times until you really find out what you want to do, and then really focus on that. And I think you'll be good. And then I guess in terms of financial stuff, because I know that grad schools, the financial burden is a huge issue, especially after going to undergrad, and you may have loans. And I think, there are definitely financial aid opportunities. I know a lot of people that are on financial aid and have jobs on campus, and there are scholarships. So I think that shouldn't be something to deter you from trying to go to grad school or something, or trying to pursue an occupational therapy degree, because there are so many ways that you could figure it out. The people that help you, their financial aid offices, people at Somerville High will even help you with like getting undergrad, FAFSA, so stuff like that. Just don't be like deterred from the financial aspect. I know it's like scary, and there's going to be loans, but at the end of the day, it's worth it, and you'll be able to pay it back with a great job like OT. So yeah.
Yeah, sort of what Ella was saying. Definitely, for sure. To the best advice I could give is to shadow at a hospital. In terms of like internships, there's not really anything. Usually once you complete like your first nursing course, you're considered a CNA, or you can take a test with certified nurse's assistant, or patient care assistant. They have like different terminology for it, but I would definitely recommend like volunteering. It's huge because A, it helps the hospital, and B, it can really give you a sense of, because school is completely different from everything kind of that you learn in school is like the proper like cookie cutter way, versus like being in real life, it's completely different. So I think a lot of people, like from what I've talked to other students, they have a different perspective when they start, like working, like everything that they learned in school, if this is like their, they have no experience in healthcare like I did, it was very shocking. And with all how expensive schooling is, to just jump in and to not have any regrets, the biggest thing I would recommend is to definitely shadow at a hospital, or either take the course and become a certified nurse assistant. That way you can work at the bedside and see what the nurses do and work with the nurses. And a lot of them that I work with, they actually know so much just by being in the field and working at the bedside. And it will give you a good, like, it will give students a good perspective as to like where they also want to end up. Some people love nursing homes, some people don't, some people love the hospital setting, some people like outpatient. So there's so many different areas, but for sure, especially because of how high the costs are, I would definitely recommend shadowing or volunteering and kind of getting a perspective. So that's really my take on it, I guess.
I guess the first thing that I would say to people is that healthcare is a massive field, and you don't have to be a doctor to work in healthcare, and you don't have to be a nurse to work in healthcare. My great grandmother, for example, ran a book and supply store that sold textbooks to Tufts Med students, way back at the beginning of time. My uncle was an MBA and he ran a hospital for a number of years. He didn't know how to put on a Band-Aid, but he ran a whole hospital. My dad was a paramedic. So there's all sorts of ways you can get into healthcare. So I'm just going to back up what Abigail said and what Ella was saying, and that is pursue your interests. Figure out what you're jazzed about. And if you're not quite sure, then take a bunch of different classes and do a bunch of different things and, sort of get your head around what it is that you're into, because that'll make your job. You can have a job that you like and do things that you like, or you can have a job that you don't like with a lot of things in it that you don't like. And you can probably figure out which is going to be a better job. The second thing I would say to anybody that's interested in doing what we're doing or doing in anything in healthcare is that showing is always better than telling. I interview a lot of people for internships or volunteer roles or for AmeriCorps, and everybody always says, "I'm passionate about working with healthcare." Well, that's great, but the people that get passed on and the people that get roles are the people that can show why they are passionate about healthcare. And so how do you show that? You show that by doing what Abby was saying. So thank you for stealing my thunder, Abby. Volunteer. Go to a place that does something that you're into and volunteer. I don't know how old some of you are, 16, 17, maybe somewhere in that neighborhood. And maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't know how to do anything. Yeah, you do. Showing up and just sort of absorbing knowledge and just doing what people tell you is hugely helpful. Where I work, if you can speak Spanish, we never have enough Spanish speakers around here. I would kill for a Haitian Creole speaker. I would kill for a Portuguese speaker to work with our patients. If you're 16 years old and you can speak Haitian Creole, people like me can probably use you. And then you start building skills. You can come to a place like this when you're in college, for example, and volunteer with our case management department. Case management at a place like this is where the rubber meets the road. Doctors, nurses, all that sort of thing, I respect them all, but case managers solve problems and get things done. And our volunteers do needs assessments, for example, with patients. Completely vital, something we absolutely need done on a daily basis. But we don't have enough case managers to pull people off task of actually working directly with the patients on things that need to get solved, like getting people into rehab, getting people ready to apply for a house. So we really lean on those volunteers to get those needs assessments done so that the case managers know what to work on. If you can ask people questions in their language and record their answers, you can be a case management assistant. Doesn't necessarily have to be at a place like this. You might, maybe dogs are your passion. Dogs are big around here. You can go volunteer at a veterinary clinic or something. I don't care if it's healthcare, whatever it is, whatever you're into, volunteer. So I'm just going to sort of wrap it up. I think I answered all the questions all in sort of one theme. So I'm going to leave it at that. The only other thing I wanted to add, since I have been given permission to do this, was I'm going to put another article into chat. I mentioned those 2 AmeriCorps that did all of that work at the Boston Hope facility last year. This is an article that they wrote about their experience doing that work. I just want to remind the students that Cecilia and Olivia, who wrote this article, about 22 or 23, which when you're 16 years old, those 8 years, those 6 to 8 years seem like forever. I've got a couple decades on all of you, so believe me, they're much closer to your age than to mine. So I hope you'll read it, and whatever they did, they're not doctors. They weren't doctors then. They're going to be doctors soon, but they weren't doctors when they were doing all of this. So it's not outside of your capabilities, I guess is what I'm saying.
Thank you so much to everyone. I really appreciated the diversity of experiences and advice that you all offered. I think some observations that I had and really have so much respect for is both the care and the curiosity that each of you mentioned. And I think, for our students, I hope that this was interesting and helpful for you, and that you each have a takeaway. And it's good as a transition for what a lot of you were saying. So for all of you Somerville High students who are now interested perhaps in volunteering, in learning more about this profession, and talking about what your plans might be after high school, and getting a job or an internship that could prepare you or help you explore, I can definitely help you with that. Again, I'm Coach Grace, and you can find me in room 302. Thank you again to all of our panelists for taking time out of your busy days to help create this program for the youth.